My name is Natalie Stewart.
My name is Chris Stewart.
We were introduced by a mutual friend named Uni Lopez. She thought that we would be a good match.
I was living in Philadelphia at the time, so I was visiting the Lehigh Valley. I think I heard that she saw me in church, and I guess she was quite smitten by my appearance. The first time we talked on the phone, after I got a number, I called her. We talked on the phone. It was like a weeknight, and we talked, I don't know, maybe like 4 hours or something like that. It was like a long time, which if anyone knows my wife turns into a pumpkin at like 10:30. So the fact that she was on the phone with me for 4 hours on a school night, that really says something. So
shortly after we started dating, you asked me how I felt about you moving from Philadelphia to the Lehigh Valley, which was a major step. He felt confident enough in our relationship at the time that you moved down to the Lehigh Valley. So once he moved, it kind of gave us time to, really grow in our relationship, get to know each other more, spend more time together. Early on in our relationship, I started to experience some health issues. I was having really bad dizzy spells that were unique. It wasn't like vertigo. It was something different. And at work, I had a pretty bad spell where I had to be taken to the hospital. After a series of tests, I was formally diagnosed with PCOS, which is the acronym for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And for women with PCOS, amongst a host of issues, one of the main and primary issues is difficulty with having children, or it becoming impossible to have a child. I feel like in that moment, my worst fear came to light, because as a kid, they thought I may have had it, but I was never formally diagnosed. So it was the realization of my worst fear coming to life. But I knew that I cared a lot about Chris, and that I felt he deserved the right to know and to make a decision as to whether or not he wanted to continue with the relationship, knowing that I may not be able to have kids, or that the road would be difficult for us, or to choose to end the relationship and to pursue something else, and perhaps another woman who might be able to give him a more certainty of children. And that was a really tough conversation to have. I was afraid, there was a part of me that didn't want to tell him, but in my heart, I just felt that was the right thing to do.
She was someone who really looked out for me. She really looked out for me. And so that really I guess made an impression on me. I felt that there were obviously exponentially more pluses than minuses. And if having a baby wasn't in the stars for us, so to speak, that didn't deter me from wanting to get to know her more and possibly, like I said, be with her, for a lifetime.
He just said, I love you, I'm a ride with you, I believe God wants us to have a family, but if not, I'm in this with you, whatever it is that we face, we'll face it together. And it was at that moment where I knew he was the man that God had for me. We actually started to go to Reproductive Associates of Pennsylvania, RMA, and we started to get consultation prior to being married, just to kind of understand where we were health-wise, what we were facing, were there any other issues that we were going to have to encounter. So it was, those conversations were very difficult to process, because that's when you realize the magnitude of the problem, and that this is going to be a really uphill battle to climb, and it's an invasive process. There's lots of tests, lots of blood work, but we did everything that we could to kind of get the greater picture. And because of my age and our ages, we knew that the more time progressed, the slimmer our chances became. So we really felt like we were working with a smaller window. In addition to the process being invasive and difficult, it's also extremely costly. And so trying to figure out how we were going to afford that as a couple was very difficult. We knew that it would cost us our savings. It could potentially cost us our savings. And so the first year, as I mentioned, we really wanted to just focus on, we had the information. We knew where Chris was with his health. We knew where I was at the time with my health, and really just felt good about that information. Took the first year to kind of just enjoy being newlyweds. But then during year 2 to really start the process. We had gone through blood work, gotten tested, and it was in that time period where I just started to notice like I was trying to lose weight, but I felt like I was gaining weight. I felt swollen, tired, just something was a little off.
I think I was asleep, and then she told me that she took a pregnancy test just out of the blue, decided to take one, and it was positive.
We were both blown away. There was no way for us to predict it. With my condition, there's no way for you to time, anything. It literally, I couldn't even tell you the when, the how.
I was just like, what? Are you serious? For real? Like, that's not a mistake? You sure? And so, I was happy. I think I wanted to kind of temper our excitement just to to get a confirmation, so to speak, from physicians.
Chris had a natural fear of me getting overly excited and then getting really disappointed. So by chance, that particular Monday there was a school delay, so I was able to go right into the fertility clinic and ask them to give me a blood test, which later in that day proved was positive. So it was a shock to us because we were just about to start the actual treatment process. Since we were already in the care of the fertility clinic, they actually started my early treatment. So I would go in to get, the ultrasound and blood test to just confirm that the baby was growing. So I was concerned and scared, but I knew I needed to tell someone else in addition to Chris in case there was an emergency. So even though we were afraid, in my mind I was convinced that if I got pregnant, God was going to make sure that this baby, made it to the end. There was no part of my mind that thought anything could go wrong. So we had made the decision mutually to inform my parents. So
That's it? That's what I thought.
You're gonna be grandparents! You're gonna be grandparents!
it was a miracle because it was an unassisted pregnancy. So I got pregnant without fertility treatment with the first baby. So for me, it was a complete miracle. It was the Lord. And I was fully convinced that God would not, He knows my heart, and that He would not let me get pregnant if He didn't intend to see that pregnancy fall through. That was just where my mind was at the time. So because we were already with the practice with the fertility clinic, they oversaw our care with that first pregnancy, even though it wasn't a pregnancy done with assisted treatment. So I was in the fertility office every week, twice a week, getting monitored, getting blood work, testing the growth of the baby. So it was somewhere around I didn't feel different. It was somewhere around week 6 where the ultrasound and the blood work demonstrated that there was a decrease in the heart rate and that the baby had not grown enough in that particular week. So we knew that something was wrong, and that we just needed to pray. And still, my mind, I was just in denial. I just really felt like God is gonna make sure that everything's okay with this baby and that we're gonna be able to see this baby full term. I just would not accept any other possibility, so I had people praying, a very small group of people praying at that time, because we were still very much protecting the information of that first pregnancy.
We went to the fertility clinic, and the doctor for a checkup, I believe, and the baby's heartbeat had diminished. So the doctor said, well, it is a cause for worry, but we'll see, how it is in your next appointment next week.
And so during the next appointment the following week, I was there with Chris. We were together. They were doing the test. And I'll never forget the look on the doctor's face. I just knew that something happened. She turned her whole affect changed, the color in her face changed, and I just knew. And it was at that moment where she looked at us and said, "I'm sorry, but there is no heartbeat."
It was definitely a tough day for us. I remember obviously not going to work that day.
And I don't think anything can really prepare you to hear those words. And I think my whole world just instantly, it just collapsed. Like everything that I knew, it just completely collapsed in that moment. And I just remember losing it in the clinic room, and it was hysterical, unconsolable. The doctor just said, "Take your time, stay here as long as you need to stay here in the office." And I just couldn't believe that, this baby that was conceived without help is no longer with us. And so that was probably one of the darkest times of my life. The minute they tell you that you're pregnant, your whole mind, you become a mother in that moment. And so it was literally me. I really felt like we lost a child, So that was a very traumatic experience. I know for us as husband and wife, but for me personally, and it was a real test of my faith in that moment.
It was just a tough day. It was a tough day. I wanted to be there to support my wife, to be there for her emotionally. But I think later on that same day, did we have was a Bible study or?
No, it was a worship night where all the worship teams were getting together.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was a worship night. Yeah, and you stayed home, right? I stayed home, and I went, and but that was really important that I went in retrospect. Not anyone knowing what had happened, because we didn't tell anyone at that particular time, but just to be around people, and obviously just taking my emotions and my feelings to the Lord in worship. That was in a time of desperation. It really helped to get me through that situation.
Once we knew that there was no heartbeat, I had asked. They give you options. We had the option to allow the baby to to kind of come through my system naturally, or to have a DNC. And I just emotionally, I just couldn't deal with the first choice, so we opted for DNC. But I just felt I needed additional confirmation that there was no life left. So we waited an additional week to have another test, and then the following week, which happened to be Easter week, I was scheduled for the DNC. And that's so I had carried the baby without a heartbeat for about 2 weeks, and we were scheduled for the Wednesday before Easter to have the DNC. And I was scheduled to sing on Good Friday and Easter Sunday, and I really had to, determine what I was going to do in that moment. But I just knew that no matter what, the enemy wouldn't take my praise. He couldn't take my worship. And so even though I was dying inside, even though I was grieving, even though I was devastated, it was critically important for me to stand on that 2 days later after having surgery, to stand on that platform and to still sing, Christ is enough, when everything that I had lost, I still needed to utter those words that Christ was enough. And the same with Easter Sunday. Was critically important for me to stand there as a declaration of faith that no matter what happens, in our journey, to be parents, that we were going to still choose to bless God and to say it is well. And sometimes it's an act of faith, and you're doing it and your feelings have to line up with the action, and that's just our humanity. But I know that it was those moments of digging deep and still worshiping and still blessing God that they really helped to pull me personally through the darkest time. So I just needed a few months before I resumed the process again. So it wasn't until about the following October, we lost the baby in April. It was the following October where I was kind of back in a mindset of, okay, we can start this process again. Unfortunately, when it comes to the fertility treatment and process, you start from ground zero again. So we had to start with the blood work, the ultrasounds, and then we find out that there's something wrong again that needed to be addressed before we actually jumped in to the treatment itself. So in around January, I think it was, they discovered that something was blocked in my system and that I would need to undergo elective surgery. So in order for the treatment to be the most successful, I was given the option to do a hysteroscopy and a laparoscopy procedure. And the idea was that if they can remove the blockage before the treatment, the chances of the treatment working would be higher. So it was another delay, which was hard for me to deal with, but I elected to do both procedures and had the surgery in about January. So the recovery for that was pretty difficult. It was a little bit more painful than I expected. But the good news is that they were able to clear everything out and kind of get the ovaries flowing the way they were supposed to go. So they were pretty hopeful that the treatments would work. So we actually were all good to go with our first treatment. And we went through the process. My body responded to the medication great. Around that time, as I'm going through this treatment, I find out that my grandmother was very ill and pretty much in hospice at this point, which was extremely painful. To kind of go through that treatment, they want you to not have additional stress. They want you to rest your body and to kind of take it easy. But I'm super close to my grandmother, and knowing that she was moved to hospice and that it was her final days was extremely painful, and complicated by the stressors as well of the actual fertility process. So unfortunately, I found out that my grandmother passed away and 2 days later that the treatment didn't work. So it was really, and no one knew, but I was processing and grieving the loss of my grandmother and the loss of another chance to be a mom. So a few weeks later, when my body was back in a position where it can start all over again, we started all over again for our second trial. And for whatever reason, this time the body just did not respond to the medication the way it had the first time, and it just didn't work, which was another loss. Every time you go through the process and it doesn't work, it's like you're grieving the loss of the potential to be a mom. It's extremely painful. It's taxing, how you change emotionally with the medication, how your body changes. It's just extremely difficult to endure.
I think I'd be a total liar if I didn't say that, throughout each step. Not that you're waiting for the next foot to drop, next shoe to drop, pardon me. But you're, I think somewhere in the back of your head, there's the previous experience of the miscarriage. I definitely prayed to God like every day, like, God, like, this needs to happen. Because I don't think that, like, we emotionally will be able to, like, recover or navigate the situation.
So the third trial didn't work, and it was the end of the school year. I just thought, you know what, let me just take a break for a month or two. Let me just finish the school year, and let's just take the last bit of money that we have and give it just one last shot in the summer. And we kind of geared ourselves up for that. But I have to be honest, I was a disaster. I was an emotional wreck. I was a mess. I was struggling to hold on to whatever hope and faith I had left. I was feeling like it was over, and I needed to accept that, having a child was just not going to happen for us. And so I was just kind of processing all these emotions, and literally we had run out of all of our financial resources, and this was the last chance. In August we had come up to the point of just, this is it. If it doesn't work, it's just, we don't even have the resources to try anymore. We have exhausted, in the 4.5 years we had exhausted all of our resources. This is it.
I think about in the Bible, we talk about Hannah, and how she wasn't able to conceive, but she prayed to God, and she said, God, if you bless me with a son, I'll give him back to you, and that was the prophet Samuel, and what we would consider one of the major prophets. I mean, you have 2 books, right? You gotta be a major prophet, right? But seriously, that was her son of promise, and I just remember that, and I just remember just praying to God that, and I can't speak for my wife. I'm pretty sure she did, similar things, but just, God, if, you bless us with this, with a child, we'll dedicate this child, raise this child, to know who you are, to do your work on this earth.
So I was really not myself, because I was just emotionally a mess. But we went through the trial. They upped the medication. They had changed it. Everything went well, but then I've gone through things going well and experiencing loss. So I just, blocked it out of my mind, just prayed and just let it go, and went through the 2-week waiting process, just, trying to take it as easy as possible. Previously in the previous trials, I would, every day take a pregnancy test just to kind of check and see if something was working. And this time I just said, I just can't do this to myself. I'm just gonna wait until the blood test and see if that confirms the pregnancy or confirms that I'm not pregnant. It didn't feel different. I didn't feel like there was anything happening or going on. But I waited, went in for my blood test, and it was later that day that the nurse called and said, I'm calling to tell you you're pregnant. And I just literally just couldn't believe what she was saying. I couldn't believe the words that came out of her mouth, and I just started crying. And she's like, "Are you okay? I hope these are happy tears." And I'm like, I could barely get the words out. They are, but as excited as I was so consumed with fear, because I knew what a positive pregnancy was, and I knew what loss was. And so I was excited and afraid at the same time, and sometimes the fear would cloud the excitement. That's just being honest. But that day I sent Chris a text message, and I didn't hear from him. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck? Is he not happy? Did he not get my message? What's going on? So later on that night, I thought that maybe he had read the message and just didn't get a chance to text me, and he was still clueless. So we had company, and I had to wait for the company to leave, and I go up to the room like, "Did you get my message?" And he's like, "Wait, today's the day?" And I'm like, "Yes, today's the day. Like, did you get your message?" He was like, "No, I didn't check it." And he was like, "You're pregnant?" And I'm like, "I'm pregnant." And we were just shocked, excited, just overjoyed, at the positive pregnancy test, but that's when a different journey begins, when that's half the battle. It's getting pregnant is half the battle. It's, being able to carry the baby and seeing the baby full term. That's a new, a new journey, a new battle begins, so to speak, Well, so I knew still early on, once we got the positive pregnancy, I went to two ultrasounds before we made the decision to notify my parents. And again, I did that because I needed, in case of an emergency, I needed someone to know and to go with me to some appointments, because Chris's job, he could not be released for every appointment that I had. And in that early time, it's so sensitive that I just needed the additional support. This time we kept it really low key. The first time we tried to do something neat and creative to make the announcement, but we were just outside on the deck and eating, and I just slid them the ultrasound and let them know the good news. As each week went on, there was more reassurance that things were okay, and that the baby was growing, and that it was a healthy heart rate, and everything was progressing perfectly. I think, during that first 9 weeks, that first trimester, I just honestly was just constantly wrestling with fear, and just trusting that that everything was going to be okay. And I just had to war with my own emotions, and to just choose to trust God through the process, And I think as it got closer to week 13, fear and hope and started to kind of equalize, and then excitement started to equalize as well. After week 13, there's a series of blood tests that they can do, and because of my age and past history, they recommended some additional tests that can make sure that, everything was okay with the baby. And once those tests came in, that's when I started to settle in to the fact that, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to be a mom. But even throughout the entire journey, I think there was a part of me that kind of felt like this is surreal, and that, I'm planning things for someone else. This is for someone else's shower. This is for someone else's nursery. This is for, somewhere in the back of my mind, it just was hard to fully register. Like, no, this is for you, Natalie. Like, you're going to be a mom, and in no time soon, you're going to welcome, a baby into this world.
I was just excited, that day. A little tired. It was a long day for sure. But I was just really, really just excited. Like, wow, like, this is really happening. Like, whoa. I think I stopped her a couple times, like in labor, like, babe, we're actually about to have a son. We're about to have a baby. Like, that was just really, really exciting.
Yeah, I really feel like the delivery process was just such a supernatural process. There was so many moments where I could really feel God's presence in the room, and I could just really feel like something special was about to happen. There was a moment in the delivery where, I could feel that he was close to being delivered. you know, and when he actually came into the world and I looked over to the side and I saw my son, it was such a supernatural, magical moment to look over and to see little hands and little feet, and to know that what we prayed for, what we labored for, what we endured for, was finally here, you know. And after they cleaned him up a little bit and put him on my chest, it just, you know, honestly, it's a really indescribable moment. You know, it's just, when every girl dreams of being a mom and having a family, and for such a long time that just felt like it was escaping me, like I was gonna have to accept that it wasn't gonna happen, and it was getting further and further away. And now the very thing that I prayed for was resting on my chest. It was just the most spiritual and magical moment, you know, that I think I'll have for a lifetime.
Like, just feeling immensely blessed, just knowing like our story, our journey, you know, with, you know, my wife being diagnosed with PCOS, and you know, doctors saying that, you know, conceiving a baby will be, you know, at the very least difficult, at the most impossible. And from that, you know, to holding like our son of, like, you know, God's promise, that for me was everything.
So one of the things that was really important to me is to still be able to bless God's name and to declare his goodness and to declare his faithfulness, even if I don't see the thing that I'm praying for, and even though I don't see the thing that I'm hoping for. And so throughout this journey, it was really me wrestling with being able to hold on to my faith in the darkest times, being able to say that God is good when I had lost everything that I had hoped for, being able to say he's faithful when the trial didn't work. You know, in life we will be tested and we will go through things, but he's still God and he's still worthy. And so I was really deeply committed to understanding God's goodness in the face of personal darkness. You know, and to the mother, the woman who's going through this process, and the father, the husband that's going through this process, you know, I would just say that you're not forgotten. You know, God sees you, he loves you, he knows you by name, and he's very close to you, even when you feel that you're so alone and that he's afar. He's very close to you. He sees you, he knows you. You know, there were so many times where I felt so alone. I felt like, you know, we're living in a world that's not always conscious of the mothers that are around us, the mothers who have babies that you don't see, the mothers who, you know, have experienced losses. Or we live in a world that's not conscious on Mother's Day of the pain of the sister in the pew that's trying so hard to you know, to experience what motherhood is. And just that, you know, my hope is to raise the level of consciousness in people's lives that, you know, that we're here, you know, that we exist, we're among you. You know, and so anyone who's going through the journey, just know that it's okay. Just know that it's okay to cry. Just know that it's okay to be angry. Just know that it's okay to be hurt and to be afraid. And in those times, pressing closer to the Lord, you know, just grow deeper in your relationship with God. You know, he's there, he sees, he understands, and his timing is perfect. You know, his will, you know, desire his will above your own will, and just trust him in the process, you know, and it's going to be challenging, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be painful, but it'll be worth it, you know. At the end of the day, you know, my relationship with the Lord is the most important thing to me, you know, and at the end of this journey, I wanted to make sure that together we were still lock and step, you know, myself with the Father, you know. I didn't want anything more than I wanted to be close to him, you know, and I really feel that helped to carry me through the journey and through the process.
The journey may not be the way that you think the journey should be, or that the way you thought it would be throughout your childhood, or when you were dating, or when you got married and you guys had these conversations. No one thinks about losing a baby. No one fathoms that when they're visualizing and dreaming about their future together, with their spouse, their significant other. I didn't know if after losing the first baby, if we were going to have our own baby, if we were going to adopt, whatever. So I don't know. Maybe that's God's plan for you. Maybe He wants you to be a foster parent or to adopt, or maybe He wants you to have your own baby from your own loins, from your own womb. I don't know. All of our journey and God's plan for all of us is different. But just know that, what He has for you is for you, and you're going to excel in that. So whether you're a parent to a child that needs a home, or whether that whether that child comes, like I said, from your own loins or from your own womb, He has that child in your life for that particular reason, and you're going to be an awesome parent.
It's just, there's a part of me that every day feels like I'm living a dream. There are moments where I hold my son and I'm just so overwhelmed with gratitude, and I just hold him and cry and just thank the Lord for his life. Like I still have these moments of, I can't believe I am a mom. Like, this is my son. I just, he's here, and I still have these like wow moments, and Mother's Day was just one of those. I can't tell you how painful and how bittersweet Mother's Day was for me, to be so grateful for my mom and my grandmother, but yet so sad that I wanted to be a mom so bad, and I just didn't think it was going to happen. And to see other mothers celebrated and to see their children, it's always been such a bittersweet day for me, and finally, I have this baby that one day is going to call me mom. It's just such a beautiful day for me. It's finally it wasn't bitter anymore. It was finally just a sweet experience for me personally. And we had an awesome day, with the family, and Chris, gave me the sweetest Mother's Day mother survival kit that he created. It was like super cool. I thought he did it on Pinterest, and he actually did that all himself. It was amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better experience, and for a better moment of just knowing that I've joined the mommy club, and I've joined the likes of other moms, and I could only hope that God would just continue to grant us the wisdom, to raise him up as the man of God that he is, and to lead him in the direction, that he's purposed to go.
All these stories, part of me, seem to start out with me being asleep. So people are going to think I'm like, some guy that sleeps all the time. My wife, she hasn't confirmed it, but I kind of have a suspicion that, she likes Noah because that was the main character from the Notebook. So I kind of think that's why she likes Noah. She hasn't admitted it to me yet, but, I think that's why.
But
who's older?
I'm technically older. I'm older by about 6 months. It's not bad. I look younger though.
That's funny. That's so funny because I use that exact terminology